Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Half of all Idahoans bought a lottery ticket in the last year, and we Idahoans drank almost $144 million worth of alcohol in fiscal 2011. One man oversees Idaho's lottery and liquor sales, and we're talking with him. Stay tuned. Dialogue is next. Hello, I'm Joan Cartan Hansen. Thank you for joining us here on Idaho Public Television, on the World Wide Web, and on public radio stations. The Idaho Lottery was established by a vote of the people in 1988, and after more than 2 decades, is the lottery still a good bet? State legislators commissioned a review of the agency and staffers from the Office of Performance Evaluation, and they delivered a report this week. One of the first questions they asked is, where does the money go? Of the almost $148 million generated by the Idaho Lottery in fiscal year 2011, 61% was returned in prizes. About 14% went to the agency's overhead.
Once prizes and operating costs have been paid for, what's left is the amount given to the state, and this works out to about 25 cents of every dollar.
So in fiscal year 2011, $17 million went to the school district building account, and another $17 million went to the state's permanent building fund. And because lottery profits were up, an additional $3 million went into the Bond Levy Equalization Support Program. This fund is designed to help school districts with annual bond interest. And just who wins the lottery? Well, over the last 3 years, more than 2,500 Idahoans won prizes of $500 or more, and 22 people won more than $1 million.
Winners are dispersed throughout the state, specifically in the $500 or more, the big prizes. While most of the winners, about 1,200 of them between 2008 and 2011, did occur in southwest Idaho, the largest dollar amount winners came from the north and southeast, which you'll notice on the screen is 22 of 27 new millionaires came from the Coeur d'Alene area, greater Coeur d'Alene area, and the greater Pocatello area.
On a per capita basis, Idahoans over the age of 18 spent $126 per person on lottery games. Lottery Director Jeff Anderson.
I did want to point out one thing about the per capita spending. When you look at the per capita spending in Idaho, you need to remember that we are, as Jared rightly pointed out, surrounded by states without lotteries. So when we have big jackpots like we had just this last week in the Powerball game, we become the home of the Utah lottery and maybe even the Wyoming lottery. So, you know, we do get play across the border, particularly in Franklin and Oneida counties.
The legislature's performance report suggested only a few changes to the lottery side of the agency's work, but it had more to say about the regulation of charitable gaming. Charities who run larger-scale bingo games and raffles must be licensed in Idaho. And because license fees are so low, managing charitable gaming costs the lottery about $60,000 a year. That news prompted Boise Senator Elliott Work to wonder if Anderson would propose raising those fees.
These organizations, many of them are small, and they do great work in their communities. And if we can mitigate that $60,000 down, you know, I think that $3.7 million, we'd like to see that 4.7. And we don't want to discourage that. So we'd have to be careful on how we balance it.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I just make the statement, and Director, I understand the need to find the sweet spot, but on one end of that scale is the fact that schools would be subsidizing the operations, even if it's only $60,000, for instance. That's a couple of educators.
The one change everyone agreed with was the removal of the licensing requirements for Christmas tree auctions. Fundraisers like the Festival of Trees are currently regulated by the lottery. Because it wasn't under the purview of the study, the report didn't comment on Lottery Director Jeff Anderson's other job, overseeing Idaho's State Liquor Division. Currently, the state manages distribution and sales of alcohol. That brought in more than $50 million into state and local governments' coffers last year. But voters in Washington state just approved privatization of its liquor sales, and a group called the Idaho Federation of Reagan Republicans thinks Idaho should follow suit.
It has submitted an initiative to the Secretary of State's office asking voters to privatize liquor sales here, too. Initiative supporters still have to get their ballot question past an Attorney General's review and then collect almost 50,000 signatures before the idea of privatizing Idaho liquor sales could go before voters.
So until then, Lottery Director Jeff Anderson will still have to oversee Idaho liquor and lottery sales. And he joins me now. Sir, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Now, the lottery brought in about $148 million into Idaho last year, and Idahoans seem to spend more than our surrounding states on lottery tickets. Is the lottery still a good bet for Idaho?
Well, we had $148 million in sales and a $37 million dividend. You know, we like to say every play pays. Somebody wins each time someone plays. We do turn back the most amount of the money that comes in back to the players. So, you know, it's inexpensive entertainment for those who choose to play.
61% goes back in prizes, 14% to your overhead, and the rest is split between the school building fund and the permanent building fund. Is that similar to other state lotteries, or is Idaho unique in that sense?
There are many state lotteries that support education in their states, but there's a wide variety of different things that good causes that are supported by their lotteries. In Colorado, for example, they support the outdoors and parks. So it just depends on what the needs are and the sensibility of the citizens. And here in Idaho, the support for the Bond Levy Equalization Fund actually sunsets in 2014, and then the money will again be split equally between public schools and the Permanent Building Fund.
So that extra little $3 million pot was just an extra add-on to the lottery after it was established?
Well, back in 2008, it was determined that the Bond Levy Equalization Fund needed some stabilization. And because it helps schools, the legislature decided to look to peeling off a little bit of that dividend. So schools and public buildings are guaranteed the first $34 million. And then anything above that goes to the Bond Levy Equalization Fund.
And that's just basically to help school districts pay the interest on their bonds for
Correct.
those districts that are having a hard time passing
That's right.
bonds.
That's right.
Okay. You promote responsible play, but why doesn't Idaho have its own program for problem gamblers? A number of states do set aside some revenue to help with people who have a gambling addiction, but Idaho doesn't have that kind of a program.
You know, we don't have a formal program. We do provide links to services on our website. Every piece of advertising and collateral that goes out asks people to play responsibly. And we do monitor the Idaho 211 care line. And, you know, we've been doing that for about as long as it's been in existence. And I'm here to tell you that there are almost zero reported instances of problem gambling related to lottery. So while it may be an issue, it doesn't seem to be something that's terribly a problem right now.
Okay. Another thing that's in the lottery world, there's the federal government is looking at regulating online lotteries, online gambling. How would that affect Idaho's lottery?
Well, it depends. There are proposals in Congress right now that would federalize the regulation of gaming. And the regulation of gaming is a legacy right, a state's right that goes back, you know, it comes out of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. And it's always been regulated by the states. And I think what we are interested in as an industry is allowing states to choose at what level they would like to participate in that, or if they don't want to participate at all. Our neighbors to the south in Utah, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with it, I would presume. And I'm not sure there's a big appetite for it in Idaho just yet. We want to wait and see what happens in the states that have started down that path already: New York, Illinois, and New Jersey.
So how does New York's work?
They haven't begun yet, but they're building the infrastructure to allow players to play games on the internet, place wagers. And we as an industry have a long record of security and integrity. That's what we base our business on. And with geo-positioning of, you know, knowing where the player is when they're making their wager, there are age verification technologies. So, you know, we think it can be done responsibly. Whether or not it comes to Idaho is up to policymakers.
How about you? What do you think of online gaming?
Personally, I would leave it to the sensibility of the citizens. I think there is great danger, though, in having that type of gaming available 24/7. Even with all of the restrictions, there are ways to limit how much people play, how much they wager, if you will. But even with that, there's still a governor on that when you have to get up and go to the store or go to a casino, for example, to enjoy the game.
We have a caller on the line. Let's go to Tony in Boise. Tony, go ahead.
Yes, hi. I'd like to know how they're planning on, if the privatization of liquor sales goes through, how we're going to replace the $50 million that the liquor dispensary currently puts into the economy. Is it going to go on the taxpayers back onto homeowners, or will we be able to raise enough tax money from the stores that will be selling it? Because they're going to want to keep the profits and not give it to the state and the schools.
Okay, Tony, let's go ahead and ask. So we hadn't jumped. We'll go ahead and jump to have you put on your other hat.
Okay.
And talk about liquor sales. Before we get to Tony's question, let's have you walk through how does current distribution of alcohol now? We're talking spirits as opposed to beer and wine, correct?
That's right. With repeal of prohibition in 1933, with the 21st Amendment, states were given the right to regulate beverage alcohol in their jurisdictions. Every state has some form of regulation, from very tight control, like you might find in Utah, where they sell beer, wine, and spirits, to complete and open markets like you have in a California or a New York or a Texas. Idaho is somewhere in between, maybe a little closer to the Utah model. But as you look at the structure of the way it works in Idaho, we are the sole importer into the state, into our central warehouse and distribution center here in Boise. And from there, we send it out through a private trucking company to all of our 66 state stores and 97 contract locations. And the result of making the product available while working to curtail intemperate use, we do have a dual mandate in code and in the Constitution. And we do that through limited locations that we believe they're convenient and somewhat limited hours. But the result of that is the net profit. We really don't have taxes per se on liquor in Idaho. There is a small 2% surcharge for drug courts and substance abuse treatment, and of course the sales tax. But the rest of it is the standard markup that a wholesaler or retailer would charge.
So does the state, is it cheaper for me to buy it from the state of Idaho or from, if I'm in Montana, from my local Seagram's dealer?
It depends. Many of our products are priced at manufacturer's suggested retail or lower, and we do have value priced products. And if you look at the projection for the future, we project about $600 million in net distributions to the people of Idaho over the next decade. So I think the caller was asking, how do we protect that?
Yeah. Well,
because if you were to deregulate the distribution of spirits, we were talking earlier, people aren't going to do this for free.
yeah.
So essentially, all things being equal, you'd have to have a $600 million tax increase on distilled spirits over the next decade to remain whole.
So where does the money from the profits of alcohol sales go?
We make distributions to cities, counties, the general fund, and a whole variety of other smaller programs, the substance abuse, the drug court, these kind of things. The liquor distribution funds are very important, particularly to smaller communities. Trying to figure out how do you reconcile the philosophical argument of why is the government in this business with what's the proper role of government with the Constitution we have and the laws we have to make sure that the product is made responsibly and conveniently available. While we do have this added benefit of extra dollars for our citizens.
How are you handling the new distillers that are the new businesses that are essentially distilleries? They're making their own spirits. How are those handled under the law?
Just like the biggest distiller in the world, we've got some great local craft distillers here in Idaho. Distilled Resources in Rigby makes very, very good products. We've got Revolution Vodka, made right down here, down the road, not far from you. Kevin Settles at Bardnay makes his own spirits. So the craft distillery business is one that's really growing. It's on the same kind of trajectory that craft beers have been over the years.
Do you anticipate some change to allow the craft distillers to be able to sell their own wares, or do they have to go through the state?
Well, what's interesting is with these types of controls, if you will, control state models, Kevin Settles, who runs Bardnay, distills his own product, but he has to sell it to us, and then he has to buy it back before he can serve it at his bar. So,
right.
I think we might be able to modernize some of those types of procedures, but that's the federal law as it is today.
Which dates back to Prohibition.
That's right.
So, okay. I'm going to jump back real quick because I wanted to because it just was so bizarre. The one thing that did come out in the Office of Performance Reviews Evaluations report was that they felt you should no longer have to regulate the Christmas tree auctions, Christmas tree sales. Why on earth are Christmas trees covered by lottery sales, the lottery department?
Well, charitable gaming has always happened in churches and fraternal halls and those kind of things. And in 1992, the legislature felt that that there needed to be some oversight of that. And of course, the lottery, being the gaming agency, was the logical choice. And over time, things get added. We started out with bingos and raffles, and then there were duck races, and then there were Christmas tree fundraisers, and OPE was very correct in recommending that the legislature remove that reference to Christmas trees because those are auctions, they're not a raffle.
So just to give people a little background, how big a charity do you have to be, or how big a charitable event do you have to be to actually have to get a license from the Lottery Commission?
Well, there are standards of what the volume of the business that you do and the size of the prizes. So, I don't want to misspeak, but when you get up to about $10,000 in sales, that's when you have to start thinking about getting a license. If you have a raffle for things that are $1,000 or less in merchandise and don't have that much cash value, you don't need a license. But we've got some charitable gaming operators that have close to $1 million annually in total revenue. So there are some big games out there.
Well, and of that, the report showed that 4 bingo licensees had their licenses revoked this year. So if I'm a consumer, how do I know that the bingo parlor I'm going to is actually a good deal?
Well, you'd have to ask the proprietor of that bingo. Generally speaking, those games that are happening multiple times a week will definitely have to be licensed. We audit them every year. These are cash businesses, and most of as the clip mentioned earlier, most of the folks are, smaller charitable operations. And we help them understand what the rules are. And even when they stray a little bit, we help guide them back. But there are some who just choose not to follow the rules. And when that happens, we revoke their license.
So the local church that puts on a raffle, they don't have to get a license?
It depends. It depends on the size of what they're doing.
If they're giving away a car, is that going to put you over?
Yes, you would have to.
You have to get the license.
Yeah.
Have to get a license. Now you're hoping to, one of the recommendations was also to try and modernize some of that.
Well, for the raffles, they recommended, and it was another great recommendation for multi-year licensing, so folks don't have to come back every year. The bingos are a little more problematic, just because there's so much cash, they happen so frequently, and we really need to have an audit trail to make sure that the charities that they say are benefiting are in fact benefiting.
And how can I find out if that's actually true? If they say they're raising money for X charity, that they actually are?
Well,
or that it's actually not all being eaten up by overhead.
Well, if you go to the lottery website, there is a charitable gaming tab on there, and you can see who's conducting charitable gaming in Idaho. We just issued our annual report, and you can see the folks that are licensed. And if you ever have a question, by all means, call lottery headquarters here in Boise, and we can guide you.
Yeah, let's get to our next caller, Mike in Hayden Lake. Mike, go ahead.
Well, thank you. My question is, the state of California and the state of Nevada sell their liquor at about 50% of what we sell here in the state of Idaho for the same size and the same whatever it is, whether it's Johnny
Container.
Walker or
Yeah.
or whatever.
Okay.
How can we, and they're making money. They're making money off of the liquor taxes. They're making money off of the sales taxes. They're making money off of the liquor licenses. How can we not think that that would happen here in Idaho and actually increase our income in the state? That's what my question is.
Okay. Well, let's ask him.
Well, I hate to keep saying it depends, but the caller is correct. You may find certain brands in certain sizes at certain locations at deep discounts over what we sell it for. That is true. But when you think about the selection that might be available, if you go into a Costco or a Total Wines or a Bevmo, you may find some discounted items, but generally speaking, in a professional bottle shop, if you will, our prices, I believe they're competitive. Are they competitive with Costco in California on a half gallon of Jose Cuervo? No. But Costco only offers, a limited number of items. So if you're looking for a smaller size or a different type of brand, it can be more difficult to find. He is also correct in that there are more license fees that are charged because you have a much thicker outlet density. So those are the things that policymakers and the people need to resolve, of whether or not having additional outlets selling distilled spirits that could be equivalent to where you find beer and wine. So you're looking at a factor of 3x, 5x, 10x of what is out there now. We really don't take a position on that other than we believe we're responsibly providing a service in a convenient way with the best customer service, and we're trying to improve all the time. But there could be some value in limiting, half pints of cheap vodka at midnight.
It is an interesting question of the free market for those people who wish to purchase and the people who feel that there should be restrictions on how alcohol is sold and consumed. How do you handle the balance as the person who's supposed to be in charge of all this?
Well, we have 163 locations, so we try very hard to make sure our state stores, the larger stores in urban areas, are conveniently located and strategically as possible. And then the 97 contractors, which could be grocery stores or auto parts shops, insurance agencies, depending on the size of the community, we want to make sure that it's available to the people. So, when you think about what would be next, again, it gets down to the sensibility of the citizens. We are trying to responsibly and diligently discharge our duties as stewards of the agency, given the constraints that we have.
And we have a Powerball question. Let's
great.
Go to Meg in Pocatello. Meg. Let's see if I can hear that. Meg, are you there?
Yes.
There we go. Go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering how the Powerball amount got doubled to play it, and I was wondering if the payoff would be doubled when you get the payoff, or if the amount donated to the schools would still be double, or how is that working?
Yeah, that $2 for Powerball, that was a shocker.
Well, the Powerball game is operated by a consortium of state lotteries. There are 42 members, and the membership, did a lot of research on what to do with a game that was turning 20 years old and hadn't changed in price. In 1989, when the lottery started, we had one scratch game for $1. And as time evolved, scratch games went from 1 to 2s to 5s to 10s to 20s, and in some states, $50. The price of a Powerball ticket had essentially remained the same. And what we've found through the years is that consumers enjoy imagining winning the big jackpot. And we had to keep raising the odds to where, at the last $1 iteration of this game, it was a 1 in 195 million to win the jackpot. Now, we were still having 12 to 15 jackpots a year across the United States, but what we wanted to do is try and provide more value to the players. So and I don't want to get too far into the inside baseball, but the match 5 prize used to be $200,000. Now it's $1 million. The odds came down from 1 in 195 to 1 in 175 million. I'm not sure about lightning and
if,
and all the rest.
Is it lightning by car, hit by struck by lightning, or hit by car, or win the Powerball?
Well, as I told you earlier, I know the odds are 0 if you don't buy a ticket.
There you go.
And other prize amounts were increased too. So,
is there more going to schools? Will we get more revenue off of $2?
Well,
or we raise the prize
during this fiscal year, and since this big jackpot run, Powerball is pacing ahead 26%. So yes, from that game, we anticipate to have more dividends go back to the schools, and it's our most profitable game too.
And how we have a whole bunch of questions that people have sent in, just kind of inside baseball questions about the lottery that we'll get to in our web extra. So so hang in there, and we'll get into that. And I just want to ask you that one question. The final question is, you run both of these agencies. It's the gaming and the alcohol. That's is this what you anticipated you'd do when you grew up?
Well, I was very fortunate to join Governor Otter, or to have him choose me to operate the lottery when he came into office in 2007. And in 2010, the long-term serving director of the liquor division retired, and the state's been in some trouble. And the governor, he's always looking for ways to try and save money. And in this instance, they doubled the work and they didn't double the pay. So, but I'm very, very fortunate to have a terrific team in both locations. And when I talk to my other colleagues, the other directors, people ask the same question: How do you do it? And as you heard me talk to Peter Morrill earlier, I mean, his job is bigger than mine. And Dick Armstrong's job is bigger than mine, and Jerry Russell's job is, you go down the list. They have more employees and a wider variety of issues. We are, in both instances, focused on very simple things: responsibility, security, integrity, and customer service, and maximizing and optimizing the dividends back to the people. So, from a businessman's perspective, it's what I've always done.
Well, thank you, sir. We've run out of time for our live show. I'd like to thank Jeff Anderson for being here.
Thank you.
Now, of course, we have more information about the lottery and the liquor division on our website. Go to idahoptv.org. Click on the website. You'll find more information. And be sure to look for that web extra where we'll give you a little bit inside the baseball park advice about those lottery tickets. I also invite you to become a friend on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you here next time for Dialogue.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. Check out our website, like us on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.